drill is what happens before the major event. I think it's a drill. You could find even inside this 12-week period that drill goes live. That's not a prediction, it's a possibility. So the signs are certainly there. I also feel the degree of criminality and the absolute expose and the almost mockery that the system turns into tells you you're at the end of times for the current game. I mean, if I just take the FTX example, as a person who's lost 7-digit sum, personally lost separate sums at a business level and a number of things, this individual sat with regulators, has been the toast of the town, and will be at a New York speaking conference, and there seems to be no sign at all that he's even going to face any form of arrest.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for November 22nd through 29th, 2022, while supplies last. This week we have 2 great ways for you to stack silver ounces: kilo bars from the nadir and Valcambi mints. Our kilo bars are 32.15 troy ounces of silver. Both are 3/9 fine or 99.9% pure, and both are individually serialized by their respective mints. The bars from the Nadir refinery in Turkey are available at $3.50 over spot per ounce, while the Swiss Valcambi bars are $4 over spot per ounce. Both bars are LBMA approved and suitable for IRA storage. And if you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us and we'll be happy to help you in that process. Our number for all orders is 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today, one of our viewers' favorite guests, Francis Hunt from the Market Sniper. Francis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for asking me.
Well, it's great to have you. And I wanted to discuss today the FTX scandal, because it seems like, a lot of investors have gotten hurt from this. And it kind of is just a window into what can happen when you store your finances, kind of on the cloud or, electronically. And you've actually stated that what happened to FTX and the situation going on there is really just a microcosm of what is happening throughout the entire financial system. Can you expand on that?
Yes, I was personally and at a business level affected by it. So it was very real. Maybe it's a warning. What comes at you as a challenge is possibly a warning. But I'll just describe that actually, because I personally experienced it, and I think you could have a smaller, a form of this take place even at the retail banking level at a later stage. So I was bundling that up as a microcosm event of a larger failure. And I unfortunately was doing a lot of international travel. So I was traveling and it was lengthy travel. And then it was actually non-farm payrolls that Friday. And we stopped at a hotel to have good internet to deliver that to our community. And we got through that. Then it was a weekend. And I was unpacking and getting resettled in. I'd been away long term. And then, Monday you couldn't withdraw, but you could still log into your account and you could still see that sum in there, but you couldn't do anything with it. It was just sums. You could trade within the platform. The functionality still worked. So it was kind of this half dead, but you couldn't withdraw. And it said withdrawals are disabled. And then a little later, it just became a hanging, turning circle and do not deposit. We're not taking any more deposits. Withdrawals are disabled. Little red warning sign. And that was the end, and your digitized numbers that were in the screen just no longer existed. And that's the thing. In fact, a bank account is no much more than exactly that. Fiat is a faith-based system, and essentially they're keeping digital numbers that are backed up on computers that are there under the guise of a hack caused by the Russians or any other narrative that could be created. Just the need to bring in a CBDC could lead to this problem, the slowly reduced functionality on sites, power down, crazy problem, reaction, solution, bit of rioting, bit of chaos, bit of supply chain. And next thing you know, you won't be able to log in anymore and all digital will be zeroized. and then whatever they choose to roll out, they can roll out. In other words, you're at the mercy. And that was my experience with FTX. And we had because the platform was easy to use, we also had a business for payments, and everything was just lost. Everything that was in there was lost. And I don't expect to get a single cent back. And I've written it all off 100% in my mind. And the warning, I suppose, in that is the same can happen to you in every other level. So there'll be people that'll say, yep, you were stupid. You're in a centralized exchange. You should have been in Bitcoin. You should have been in a cold wallet. You should have been gold. Well, I do have gold and silver. I have my pet favorite demo bar that I always pull out at every opportunity. It feels like real money, but you have money everywhere. And that experience, rather learn from my experience and recognize that the same could happen to you even in the retail banking sphere. We've had a lot of depositors running on Credit Suisse at the moment. There could come a point where they either need bailing out, there'll be some other event, there could be something on the British pensions, the whole banking system goes into contagion. It'll be a Sunday morning, and you'll hear you won't be able to log into your bank account, or you will, but you won't be able to move anything. And, it's just a similar process. And then they can roll out whatever they want. And it was a real eye-opener. There's no one to email, there's no one to call, really. No one's going to take your email or respond to it. No one's going to answer your call. You just watch this contagion of collapse that ends in an ever more distant relationship to what you once considered as an electronic digitized asset that resembled some element of your liquidity personally. And it just vaporized. And I want to say that it's quite clear there was a lot of fraudulent, skullduggery, mismanagement. And I'm here to tell you that if you don't think that there's a much bigger scaled version of that in our current financial system, then you're an eternal optimist and you need to think again. So it's got me in full, and I feel foolish to have been caught in a counterparty risk situation, because I'm the guy who've been almost messianic, the John the Baptist of calling of this great coming of counterparty risk. Even I've warned even on very good trades that could be induced with the dollar dominance and other currency failures. You could actually make the profits and never get to see the money. So we've scenario cast and thought through how things break down. And still I got nabbed. So take a lesson from me. There is real counterparty risk. And as I've said possibly in previous times, that which you hold is still there in the morning, That which you hold is still there in the morning. Whoever your favored bullion provider may be, once he's made his delivery, that is yours and it's yours to keep. And the only way someone else takes it off you is they have to send a man with a gun or someone with something that you're happy to have, in trade or barter. Otherwise, it's yours and it'll still be there in the morning unless you get drunk and talk to too many pals in the pub about where you've stashed it. So with that in mind, it's a good time to think tangible. Take something from me. I still consider I was over-biased and I was overexposed, is the word I'm looking for, to what I consider the digitalized assets. And crypto today, fiat dollars in your Bank of America account tomorrow, your European Credit Suisse account, whatever the case may be, your Deutsche Bank, your Barclays, all of them. So I'm not picking on anyone particular. And I do feel that experience could echo and it's worthy of a share. And that's one of the things that will retain compact amount of value is, of course, silver and gold.
Now, you mentioned how that it is a microcosm and the things that were happening at FTX are happening around the financial system. Now, we're not probably speaking, legal in any legal terms here, but we're talking about the risks out there, right? So can you explain a bit more about what went on, at least what we know right now with FTX that made all these accounts essentially vanish? At least that's what it seems like, where these accounts are right now, and then how it could happen throughout the financial system.
Well, as you quite correctly say, we only know what we read, and we can only surmise from that which has been read and statements that have been made. So this is not a personal statement of fact. It's just I'm no better informed than you. Reading a bit of Zero Hedge here, a bit of Bloomberg there, and they'll tell you what they think they know, and you will repeat it on that basis. So my assessment is that all forms of real control over the funding were incredibly loose. Expenses were submitted in kind of these kids out of college chat rooms where chats disappeared after a certain number of days, and they were paid. There was a lot of text speak, like, cool, yeah, do this, don't worry, maybe later, da ba ba ba, emoji. And in essence, any real notion that there's been supreme level of record keeping and due honest diligence doesn't look to be the case. It's quite clear that they were, despite Binance being, I think it's 10 or even 20 times bigger, so don't quote me, these guys were just out marketing them. And also out lobbying them, and seemed incredibly cushy and close mates with people that are responsible for regulating against criminality in the financial system, the traditional TradFi, as they'll call it, traditional financial system. So I'll stay out of what went to political donations and other nefarious dark deeds, but there's a lot that could be said in there. I don't want to drag your channel into repeating elements that could get you into any form of trouble, but there's a lot. There's a dirty old pile of non-fiduciary duty-based accusations that have been levied, correctly or incorrectly, and it's quite clear that when I looked at the quality and the intuitiveness of the platform, I actually felt there was a legit business here. When I looked at the marketing and the amount of spend, and you were in Formula One and UFC and everywhere, it looked like this was an aggressive business that was well funded and on the grow, and it was just a particularly bigger Ponzi scheme where actually behind the scenes family members were purchasing property with client money, and some were being given loans and various other. That is the accusation that is being levied. That's not a statement from me. I'm not in New York. I'm not in the Bahamas to undertake that, but it just seems a very, very low level of fiduciary duty was actually done. And I suspect, as per subprime, where we did get a little bit of a peek under the bonnet, where ratings agencies were rating things as A positive and calling it a pile of crap. Investment banks were doing the same in internal chat rooms. Oh my God, I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole. Yes, it's fine. Buy notes. All of this. So the lack of principle and integrity, the lack of the great extent of duality, the tendency to see a certain segment of the market as turkeys for a stuffing, very much seems to underlie that lack of integrity. And this is a very low integrity system. It is just a super scaled one. And the thing is, it's brought us all into it because it's been propagated for an extended term that we can't actually visualize its collapse. In the same way I thought FTX seems too big. I'm not jumping onto some small skittish little exchange. This is the second biggest exchange. These are the guys that are, in New York and close to these people and lobbying. These are people with clout. They won't be doing, a rug pull. And actually they were. I saw him as being positioned as a Zuckerberg figure, and that this was going to be a big, and they were going to continue to organically grow. I did find them more usable than their bigger rival. And I was totally suckered in by the size of the lie, which takes us to that Goebbels quote that many people have been exposed. To really win people over, tell the biggest of whoppers of a lie. And our financial system is the great whopper of a lie. It is the ultimate whopper, which surpasses FTX by a quadrillion or two, in my opinion. And in essence, it will be rounded up. We've done some very interesting scenario casting on how we think that pans out, actually, and we can get into that if you want. But that the entire system is counterparty risk, the entire system. So anything that is digitized will, in fact, end up failing through collateralized exposure, even without being rotten itself. So that's my takeout from FTX as a microcosm and what happened. And it's a reminder to self that I allowed myself to be seduced, and I shouldn't have, and I was overexposed, and that the biggest lie is yet to come, and I get a second chance to save the little that I have in there. to ensure it's in a vehicle that will survive what I call almost a birthing of a new system, where there's going to be a major constriction and a birthing of a new system. And if you have time, I'm happy to elaborate a little further on that, but that's the answer to your question.
I think that would be fantastic to kind of go through maybe some possible scenarios out there, because I think when people hear, oh, well, my bank account, it could, just turn off and something like that. What is the real risk out there? Because I know also there are some, at least, purported insurance out there, a $250,000 FDIC insurance, at least in the US, on people's bank accounts typically. So your perspective on that, what is the real risk inherent in the system right now and some of the possible scenarios we could see moving forward?
So for people that rely on the FDIC, my message to you is that's part of the great lie. This is mood music to give you comfort and to keep you trusting in the fiat game until they're ready to pull the entire tent down on everybody. So this is not about if, it's about timing, in my personal opinion. So anything that tells you about guarantees was invariably in lieu of one particular, maybe mid-sized bank falling over and everybody else contributions putting into a fund and government stumping up and making everyone whole. The entire system failing. There is no FDIC for an entire system failure where every single bank. What there will be is a whole new deal. And it wouldn't surprise me if they reel out legacy things. We've seen the Build Back Better. We've seen a brand new deal. You think Roosevelt, I think it was, if I got my American history right, you'll see similar phraseology and solidarity, and we're all going in it. But on the question on some of the detail, one of the things and one of the theories that are being put forward that I've investigating and I'm sort of playing through as a scenario, because we're trying to forward understand the journey path that this goes, is essentially we are looking to go through the eye of a needle. One system needs the debt to be, you're thinking of, say, an ant loaded with this huge bag of fertilizer that it pulls along. Let's say it's a dung beetle. In other words, it's carrying something that's rather stinky and of low value. It's going to cross over a boundary as part of this reset. So there's going to be a key defining line where only the beetle comes through, and everything that was toxic and hamstringing actually gets lost and left behind for a rebirthing of a new system. And that, of course, has to be debt. And debt at the moment, as in our opinion, has started a turn in losing value and a run in rates. Even though we've seen the dollar soften and rates coming off now, our overall opinion is that debt is going to be tapered to zero. So you're going to have the old dollar system, and then of a weekend you will have, with a problem, a reaction, and some form of new solution. So there'll be quite a bit of time in that process of problem and reaction. But in that solution, you'll be offered a central bank digital currency, which will actually be new, immediately utilizable. And the people that are at a moderate to low income will essentially have up to a certain amount. Let me throw out a nominal amount just to make it a narrative. So I'm forward guessing here, $10,000. So if you have $10,000 or less of old world dollar money as we birth into this new system, you'll get $10,000 of CBDCs, which will have all the surveillance and other attributes addended, you can rest assured, plus a carbon credit and a number of other things. But with the legacy debt, anybody who wants to take more through that will have to go through Boom. So you actually got this 14-lane superhighway with all the old dollars, and you're going to have young kids on bicycles and skateboards going through this highway toll road and Booms. And because they'll have low amounts of money, they'll get through fairly easy. They'll just be flipped to CBDCs. If you PAYE, pay as you earn, you might be asked questions on tax and various other things, aspects to prove anything beyond 10,000 has had all its dues paid upon it, etc., etc. So what you end up with, a wealthy person, instead of being just a small motorcycle that can get through easily through this constriction now just to a 2-lane toll with booths and what do you call it, things that you have to stop at. The big trucks are going to get stuck. Anyone with wealth that has lots of assets that want to come through in the old dollar systems are going to say, well, you have to wait for that. You have to take longer. You have to go through various IRS processes to prove that, various things that you're a good citizen, you've done this. So one of the key elements is I see the middle and the wealthy being the most flattened in this process. And you would represent, if you're in that, if you had $1 million or in a bank or a couple of banks, you would actually have to go through far more paperwork, much longer period. What ends up happening is that the people that make it through to the other side, eventually they take a certain amount of time, but that old legacy dollar system starts to lose value. And there'll be a sort of back door where you can go into CBDCs, but they'll only offer you a certain percent of what you had in these bigger amounts to get through. Otherwise, you stand in the queue, you wait for government to review your process, they have a real long line, and your big wealth is not making it through this this artificially created constriction, which is almost like going head first through the birthing canal of your mother. You've got to, it truly is going to be a difficult thing, this birthing process, and you're going to be holding your breath to get out the other side. And as that plays out, what will happen is more and more people will take the deal, and very quickly the CBDC value, the old dollar versus the CBDC, will be tapered to a zero. But they won't do it immediately, and this might even be only in a black market sense that can actually happen. Other amounts are beyond that limit. Without all sorts of awkward questions. So we end up with a system where we create a new market where the old dollar can no longer be used easily. To get it turned into new dollars, you will have a parallel period running of these two systems, but where one will be made out to be the Cinderella relative to the bright new shiny toy, and it'll quickly taper in value. So debt and bond owners will not be able to sell and get new CBDCs with these things. And if that which they will convert will be at an ever tapering lower rate. And that's how they will kind of let the dung beetle through the hole in the wall, minus his burden. Let's put it like that. If you'll enjoy the analogy, we're trying to keep some humor in all of this, but pensions, of course, go bust as a result of that, which then sees elderly being put onto the equivalent of, say, a UBI, subject to complying with certain health needs, which could see them face some levels of the kind of medical treatments we've had recently, which might not always be good for their health. But that I might be wrong entirely on that. So a little bit of spitballing. And the example of that, some people think it will be great to have debt, because essentially, if you're hyper leveraged in the old dollar, that debt dies, but the asset you own goes through with you. So shared certificates will still be valid after this birthing event. Bond holders will still be valid, but they will be in dollars, and they will have been essentially collapsed in value in the old dollar system. So you're actually going to have this parallel, it's difficult to visualize, but a parallel system of a dormant, failing, less active, less liquid, decaying past, and a simultaneous bright, shiny new toy. And many people have not experienced this, but if you go to speak to an Argentinian, they've had their bank balances above 1,500 corralled and taken as government debt, and then had it paid back and given a government instrument that in 3 years was largely worthless. That's one example. In South Africa, we used to have the commercial rand and the financial rand, and that was a way that the local people got hammered, but it was kept attractive for foreign direct investment. This was during the apartheid era. So this notion of a two-tiered pricing, which could parallel run, where one gets properly hammered, and you could taper the thing you don't want, which invariably is debt and will be the bond markets, to being very low value till eventually zero, whilst carrying through assets into a new system and getting a fresh start. That process, that bottleneck, is something I'm spending a lot of time thinking out and scenarioing. But I've given you already quite a bit to unpack there, so let me just give you an opportunity to ask any questions.
I think that's all very interesting. And as you mentioned, it seems like similar things have happened in different countries before. So this isn't entirely unprecedented here. When it comes to how do people then prepare for these? This is one possible scenario that you kind of laid out there. So how do people hedge themselves against that if they are, as you mentioned, maybe a little bit, on the wealthier side, and it might be harder to transition into the new system?
Well, I often sit with guests and they say, well, right now, as the dollar's pulling back, a short-term trade in debt you could do well. And that technically might be correct. But to me, debt is the absolute avoid instrument. There is a complete proliferation of it. We have seen bidless markets, not just in Japan, but in the UK, and we'll see in due course in America, given the right circumstances. So debt is to be avoided as an asset, as an investment. That is debt. I also fear for those that think it's great to load up debt because we're going to get jubileed out, and it's the bag on the dung beetle's back that's not making it. Beware, because there's multiple layers to how this plays out. Billionaires that have borrowed at exceedingly low rates with very beneficial terms that are often part of a mega corporate. So let's just throw Bezos or Musk out there, for example. The manner in which they might personally or as a corporation borrow and the terms at getting a commercial credit line is not the deal you get on your credit card, your overdraft with your retail bank, or even a personal loan. So there are different standards of debt, and they will benefit potentially. They could get their debt denominated in the old dollars. Their assets and Tesla shares will soon be listed in new CBDC dollars, which will be the shiny new toy for a while. And then they could actually get a lot of benefit by having their balance sheets rinsed out of what's now an old decaying liability. They might forego the retail banking system of that. Remember, CBDCs do not really need retail banks. So the retail banks could be part of that roll of dung that's on the dung beetle's back. That isn't coming over to the new system. They leave that stank all behind, and they carry on as a fresh scarab on the other side. So there's quite a lot of interesting deep dives that can be done on this process, which is just a point of fascination for me. But be careful of loading up debt for yourself at your retail banking level, because what you might find is there'll be different layers of debt, and that the debt that you have in your credit card will just be converted to CBDC-based debt. And also, in the death of the bond market, interest rates will spike. So before you cross birthing point, there's going to be that major constriction, that's sort of that in utero squeezing down the channel point, where the rates spike. And you might not, all these great income producing assets that are physical, like property and gold you've borrowed to buy, you might get shaken out with a super spike in interest rates. That makes the rates absolutely not affordable. I live debt free, but if I suddenly decided to borrow, I could probably borrow quite a reasonable amount. I'm cash generative. I have very low debt. But if the rates went from 7 or 8%, even if just for a short spell, to 25, 35%, you could be shaken out. And the banks could say, listen, we need mark-to-marks almost on a daily basis. Otherwise, we're seizing the assets. And remember, they'll always be put as main creditor. And this is a great way of you'll be happy and you'll own nothing. A final shakeout of people out of assets. So leverage could be the Trojan dynamite that is part of the controlled demolition of your personal finance. So be very careful about being in leverage. Take your cash generation and get the physical things without the bank involved, because you might not get the saving jubilee or tapered to nothing or very low value that, say, a megacorp might. And I feel there's an apartheid within the financial system in terms of access to credit. I think that's proven, and terms of credit. So by not eating at the top table, you may not get what you think. So be very, very careful. That's a thought.
Now, one thing that I'm noticing about, for example, the digital dollar is there's no mention about it being backed by gold or anything like that. And in the past, when we've moved, when one currency system has failed and we've had to go to a new one, a lot of the time people run to what's real, right? Precious metals. And they demand that currency is then backed, that you go back to something real. You don't go back to, just another fiat currency system. Why will people accept just another currency that has no intrinsic value?
So one of their big tasks is going to make the new system that they birth have any credibility. And one of the ways they'll do that is suppressing of the old system. So given that you're in a kraal that's literally on fire and they open the gate to the other one, will all naturally stampede, where there'll be all these great new terms. They may even give a stipend and a bonus and a bit of, there might be some, not just stick, but a little bit of carrot. There might be, for your new CBDC, you're a good citizen, everyone gets a little bit of, what do we call it, stimmy, or in the UK when you were getting salary when you couldn't work, there was a word for it. It's just skipped my mind, but the equivalent of a little stipend as well. Here's a $3,000 bonus, Elijah. You're in that age group. You made the following contributions to society. Well done, and this is it. So a little bit of carrot as well as stick, and so that you're encouraged to convert. It's almost like free tokens in an airdrop. When Bitcoin existed, and they launched new coins, and they said if you've got X amount of Bitcoin, you can have certain amount of those tokens. So it's almost like a no downside and something for nothing element that will coax you into the new system. Plus, they'll make high of the fact that the debt market is not coming over. So it's a non-leveraged system, whilst that is going to remain parked in the old system. And the old system will become more and more uncooled, full of decay, less liquid, and tapered to nothing. So that's how, by only giving you a beauty contest between a warthog and the one-legged lady, you still choose the one-legged lady on account of the alternative is just unfathomable. Within that, I would definitely say that metals is that golden arch, which is an arc. And I think I used this analogy with you previously, where you're going on this old iron horse locomotive. I used to love the Western. There was the iron horse and Bonanza era, the US TV programs. And then suddenly we're going to this monorail that is running on magnets and power. And there's got to be the railway line just ends. And then there's a chasm. And then there's this new technology that's all shiny, bright, and new. Gold and silver will be that sort of magnetic magic carpet ride that is the thing that survives in arcing you over the chasm. And many of us will stay on the old trip, in a financial sense, we'll be stuck on the old iron horse and we'll go over the cliff, when one of the classic bridge gets blown out, and we'll be falling on down. And we'll be essentially, in a financial sense, blown up and wrecked. Whilst those that manage to teleport over from the side, and this is the greatest use. Gold is never going to find a greater use case than the key moment between the termination and the winding down of a legacy system and the new, fresh establishment of a brand new system. This is the most valuable thing that the layman can have to ensure they bridge any level of balance sheet and asset worth from there. Everything else digital is likely to be crushed because it's not in their interests that the bourgeois come across as middle class and reasonably wealthy. With what they're trying to force you into, it's far more useful that you are leveled down and flattened to serfdom, where you sign on anywhere and in a high state of fear. Preservation of wealth is not what they want, and you should seek that. That's my key point. And there isn't a more seminal moment for precious metals than the bridging of the legacy system being tapered away and the commencement of a brand new system, for which there will be a parallel period where they both coexist. You've got to get your stuff from the old onto the new without it being switched off. It's got to be physical. It can't be digital. Massive digital losses. Most of us, actually, even though we talk of cryptos and CBDCs, most of our money is digital. It's in a bank. They can declare force majeure and it can go. So holding your wealth is 9/10 is the law. That famous phrase. And this is the 9/10 I'm talking about. In your grubby little mitts.
Now, before we let you go, if we can then, I guess, touch on what are the signposts that you'll be looking for to show that, this scenario is playing out. I mean, we already have the test of the digital dollar that the Fed announced. What are the next signposts that people should be looking for?
That's a huge one, by the way, that you just touched on. It's an absolutely huge one. And it's important to point out it's cross multiple banks. So we're actually having news leak of a soft run on Credit Suisse. You have a multi-pan-European US trial, and I don't call these things trials, I call them drills, Drills are what happen before you go live on an event. I was in the military. Many of you may have a big audience of vets as well. A drill is what happens before the major event. I think it's a drill. You could find even inside this 12-week period, that drill goes live. That's not a prediction, it's a possibility. So the signs are certainly there. I also feel the degree of criminality and the absolute expose and the almost mockery that the system turns into tells you you're at the end of times for the current game. I mean, if I just take the FTX example, as a person who's lost 7-digit sum, personally lost separate sums at a business level and a number of things, this individual sat with regulators, has been the toast of the town, and will be at a New York speaking conference. And there seems to be no sign at all that he's even going to face any form of arrest. You're talking about somebody who bought property with other people's funds. You're talking about a core Zine, MF Global of crypto in the home in New York. He will do actually quite a high-profile event and answer questions. And he's already been softballed, interviewed, where it's not about him and what he chose to do. It's all about regulation. They're going to manufacture the message they want out of this event. The fact is he's a fraud and a thief. He's done immense financial damage to an immense amount of people. He's done a lot of damage to an industry that a lot of people had a lot of belief in. I don't count myself as one of those. I saw it as a great trading market. I don't attach belief to anything in terms of money systems and people, but it's done an immense amount of damage and should surely be facing arrest and lots more. This is mockery. So you get the social indicators as well as the financial that are telling you that this is an end of times conduct. There is very little justice. There is a two-tier system. There is the supremacists that get away with murder, and there's the law for everybody else. And I think that is becoming more and more apparent, more and more in your face. And I don't know what to believe anymore in terms of news feeds, certainly in terms of the mainstream. And I think that entire inversion is in itself another great sign that they're ready to bring the whole show down, because people start to veer towards the truth when the curtain's about to be pulled back. People start to bend, and you start to see the narrative bending towards the eventual. And now they're playing out admitting certain things from the World Economic Forum and many others. So I think everybody should prepare as if it's this Sunday. That's, again, not a prediction, but you should have that mentality. You should have a to-do list every day that you are taking yourself out of the digital system at every level. Every account, just what you barely need to survive, be cash generative so that there's some level of cash flow. Everything else should get physical. And your prepping, your personal prepping from security, food, friends, water and heat, energy. You should be deep on that. A project a day keeps the taxman and the extractors away.
Well, Francis Hunt, I definitely think it's a wake-up call, this interview. It's been a delight to have you, and thank you so much for sharing your insights. Before we let you go, if our viewers are interested in learning more, they can go to themarketsniper.com. We'll link that in the description of this video. Any last thoughts before we let you go?
Yep, they're welcome to follow the YouTube clip. We essentially have seen these days coming from about 2.5 decades ago. And I started a business in 2007 and 8 specifically for building wealth in reset times. This is our forte. Precious metals plays a key role in it. There's much more you can do in terms of entities and other things, which we get into greater detail. Thanks for having me on. Go to themarketsniper.com if you wish to engage.
Fantastic. Francis, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Same to you, Elijah.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.